Well, hello, everyone. This is BJ Murphy, publisher of Neuse and NeuseNews.com, and really excited to bring you another coronavirus chat this afternoon right here on Facebook Live on our Neuse News page. Thank everybody so much for subscribing to our newsletter and certainly being a follower of our Neuse News Facebook page. And real quick, I know we got a couple of very special guests today. I want to make sure that you have the latest information related to the coronavirus as the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services reported this morning. In fact, Travis, if you could hear me, I saw a little glitch there. Just want to make sure we're okay there. But this morning, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services said that we actually have 1,307 cases now, which from Saturday on March the 21st, it was 184. So you can tell that we've grown well over 1,000 cases in the past 7 or 8 days. Unfortunately, we've had 6 deaths across the state, and we're now up to 137 hospitalizations. And as the information around the COVID-19 has been very rapid, almost feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose over the last week or two, Neuse News set up a breaking news text alert system just for that. So all you've got to do is text the keyword NN to 484848. That's NN to 484848 for that breaking news alert. And we know that this afternoon at 5 o'clock, the governor's executive order is going to be in effect, and we're going to spend some time talking about that in just a moment. But I also want to let you know that if you are a small business owner or business in our community, Lenoir, Greene, and Jones counties, typically we haven't allowed small businesses or organizations to be or for-profit organizations to be a part of our We Report Neuse News Facebook group. We've got well over 4,000 members in that group. Really, the whole idea was just neighbors helping neighbors. And so because of this coronavirus, we've actually opened that up. So if you're a business owner and you want to share a menu item or a special deal or something, we just ask you to limit that to twice a day. But you can join that Facebook group, We Report NeuseNews.com. It is something that we moderate. We keep up with the comments as well. So we'll make sure that you have that information available to you. Again, it's We Report NeuseNews.com. Also, we have a very special message from Lenoir Community College during this time, a public service announcement. So let's hear from the college. Touching a message from our partners at Lenoir Community College. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And today we're really excited to have no stranger to this program or to Neuse News, Senator Jim Perry. Thank you so much for being on the show today, sir.
Thank you for having me, BJ.
And we have another special friend, someone who's actually helped represent our area. We know that you represent Lenoir and Wayne County, so help introduce our guest.
We are fortunate today to have Representative John Bell, the majority leader of the North Carolina House, to join us. John spends a lot of his days in meetings right now, as you can imagine, so I'm very thankful to have him here with us.
Hey.
Well, hello, Representative. Thank you for jumping on.
It's nice to be with you. It's nice to be with you. It's actually good to see everybody. Wish we could do it in person.
We've had to practice our own bit of social distancing here at Neuse News. We did this about a week and a half ago. Senator Perry was actually in the studio with me, but we've had to use a little bit of technology. So thank you guys for jumping on. Let's get right into the big topic of the day. In just about 50 minutes or so, the governor's executive order 121 goes into effect. Let's talk a little bit about that. So, Representative Bell, would you mind just kind of shedding a little light into the intent behind that executive order?
Well, the whole intent beside this executive order and executive order 120, the one previously before that, was to hopefully limit the impact it was going to have on our healthcare providers and hospitals across the state of North Carolina. One of the biggest concerns we have with the virus is that because it spreads so quickly that we could actually have an outbreak here in North Carolina that would overwhelm our hospital system and make it very difficult for our providers to give the care needed. And that is why you've seen the social distancing. That is why you've seen the request from work from home. Unfortunately, that's why you have seen some of the businesses and bars and restaurants be asked to go to takeout services only, and the gatherings from 100 people to 50 people now to around 10. And that's the intent of the order to stop the hospitals and our healthcare system from being overwhelmed, which is exactly what people have seen happen in Italy, and we hope it doesn't happen here in North Carolina.
Well, and as majority leader, when it comes to the executive branch, the governor's office, is this something that you're consulted with, or is this something that you're kind of informed of before it's made or signed into law? How does that process work?
We get informed by the governor's staff on normally what has happened over the last couple of weeks is that about every other day there's been a telephone conference call with senators and House members across the state, and the governor and his team, Secretary Mandy Cohen and Director of Emergency Management, Director Sprayberry, are on the line, and they're going through and addressing the issues that they're seeing and how they're seeing. And then they're giving us normally about a 12-hour heads up on, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is where things are going. But it's ultimately the governor's decision right now. But we have been in communications. We have been briefed before the decisions have been made. And it gives us a chance to add some input as well. But ultimately, it's the governor's decision under this emergency declaration. We are still under a declaration of emergency that was issued about 3 weeks ago. And so the governor has the authority to make those decisions at this time.
And we'll bring on Senator Perry. Senator Perry, I know you've been heavily involved in this conversation as well. I know there's been a lot of communication about what is essential or not. Let's talk a little bit about that part of this executive order. When people think 5 o'clock it goes into effect, tell us what happens, because I've heard some people concerned about, do I have to shut my doors at that time? Let's talk about that for a second.
So unless your business has been specifically named in one of the executive orders that have come out previously, you do not have to shut your doors at 5 p.m. They should have already been shut down if you need to shut down. And I realize that 5 o'clock timeline put some doubt in people's mind, but there's also some, I think, frustration about what's being named as an essential business and what's not. So let me try to clarify that. In an ideal world, the governor would be able to shut down every business. Nothing would be open, no grocery stores, no anyone, and you would stay home. But that's not feasible. So they start with things that are deemed essential by Department of Homeland Security, and you've all seen or most of you have seen a CISA document. And then there are additional things that are needed to supply those essential businesses. I think that he's really worked hard to try to strike a balance to allow as much commerce to take place as possible, because we must keep cash moving in our economy to have a really good opportunity for economic success in the future. This is going to devastate some small businesses and large ones alike. So it's a balancing act, and I don't think there's an easy answer. And I think these are imperfect solutions for an imperfect issue.
And Representative Bell, you've served in the House for a minute. Tell us a little bit about the cash situation with the state. I know you've had some surpluses over the last few years. Kind of curious about the status of the cash for the state emergency funds and how that ties into the policy that you all are working on at the state level.
we had a really, really big crisis in the state when you had the economic downturn, and we had a lot of folks that, frankly, were living off unemployment. We even found situations where people were moving outside of North Carolina and moving into North Carolina because of the unemployment benefits. And so when the economy upticked, we took a shot at trying to fix our unemployment insurance system, and we were successful in doing that. And now we have a robust system, which has about $3.9 billion in reserve, and that's thanks to the work of the General Assembly. But really, the big part of that was from the business and industry sector across the state, where we teamed up as public and private entities and fixed our unemployment system. So I feel good about our unemployment system. Unfortunately, we're having a major strain on that right now, and with 10 million people plus in the state, and the jobs that are being lost and people being laid off right now, 3.9 billion will go pretty fast. So we're trying to manage that. We're glad the federal government stepped in to assist us with that, with the CARES Act that was signed into law on Friday, and was glad to see President Trump sign that and start moving that process along. We've also been very blessed because of responsible budgeting over the last 10 years that we've been able to prepare for what we call a rainy day. Unfortunately for many of the people watching and all three of us, our rainy days have been hurricanes and floods, and the state has been able to step in and put over $1 billion towards relief with Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael. Because we've tapped into that, that is now a little lower, but we're still over $1 billion. With that, I can't recollect the exact number, but we do have reserves in place in a number of places throughout the state. The issue we're going to have is with the amount of job loss that you're seeing and people filing unemployment, and the sales tax revenue not being collected. It's going to put a real burden on the state. And now you have the tax return deadline issued to July 17th. And so we actually won't know our state revenues going into the 2020-2021 budget cycle until probably August. So we're preparing for the worst in North Carolina, but I do feel like we're prepared to manage the hardship. And I think we're going to be in a whole lot better situation than most states in the country.
Yeah, I know with the federal government, the stimulus package, I've had this conversation with Senator Perry that it seems like a really nice gift, but it seems like not enough for some families and irrelevant for others. I know there's a very tough balance between stimulating the economy and also protecting ourselves. What do you expect for small businesses and unemployment related issues in terms of people being able to get funds? I know Senator Perry, you had some thoughts on that as well.
Well, people need to go through the process, and I've talked with a number of people that have tried to go through the online portals, and it's been clogged up and the site's been down, and so they're working to fix those and get people in place where they can help as many people as possible. It's my hope that once this is over, we can unleash a lot of these people will stop filing unemployment claims and actually go back to work. It is tough to strike the balance. There's families out there that are truly suffering, and $350 or $600 or $1,000 on non-recurring is not going to make a huge impact. But we're trying to help as many people broadly as we possibly can across the state. But we're going to have to all work together to get through this. It's going to be tough the next couple of weeks, but I feel like we can get through it.
And Senator Perry?
Yeah. So to Representative Bell, to Leader Bell's point about the change that we've seen in unemployment, from March, I think 14th to today, the state has had an increase in unemployment claims of like 2,500%. So there's going to be some frustrations as they ramp that up and prepare for the sheer volume increases that we've seen today. I believe that the majority of help that we're going to see is going to have to come from the federal government for small businesses. And it's just because the federal government doesn't have a constitutional amendment that requires they work with a balanced budget like we do. And additionally, the state has to be thoughtful and prudent in how they manage their cash, because as Leader Bell alluded to, we're not only going to have some shortfalls this year in what was projected, but as we head into the next biennium, we're going to see a very significant change in the amount of cash that the state is bringing in, and the citizens are going to want us to be able to provide those essential services that we provide today. So it's going to be a balancing act, but I feel comfortable in saying I want everyone to understand that the real assistance for small businesses has to come from the federal government. It's just a matter of resources for the state. We don't have unlimited amounts of cash.
And the reason why the federal government has unlimited amounts of cash is simply because they can print it, whereas the state government has to have a balanced budget based on our own constitution, correct?
That's correct. Right.
So I had I don't know if you got a chance to read John Hood's column earlier today, but he is for those who are watching, in fact, if you've got a question, right before I get this question, if you've got a question for Senator Perry or Representative Bell, go ahead and drop it in the comments. We've got this showing on a couple of feeds, so just drop it in the comments. We'll look at it, and if we get a chance before the show ends, we'll ask them. I've got a couple of questions of my own, but today, columnist John Hood, who writes 2 or 3 columns a week, very well versed in our state government. His title of this column that we published today is called "Shelter in Place Isn't Sustainable." And here's a quote from it. He says, "I have been ordered under threat of arrestment or imprisonment to minimize my contact with friends and family who live across town or in another city. I've been ordered or under threat of arrest or imprisonment not to assemble with others to express jointly held opinions or practice our jointly held faith." And he was referring to, some of the punishments, but then he goes on to say the draconian response, something we've never seen, to COVID-19 has imposed grave economic and social consequences on North Carolinians and certainly other Americans. He said they won't shelter in place for months. They really can't, and they'll become increasingly impatient. And his question really is, does North Carolina have a plan moving forward?
Leader Bell, you want me to take that one?
Well, go ahead, Senator.
So I did read John's column, and I thought that he, as he typically does, John made some very thoughtful points that we learned to expect from him. I think that the people are tolerating a great deal. We all are right now for the greater good, but there is a concern about how long the people will accept this, and they will only be governed so much. So I think as we have more opportunity to hear a plan for what the next steps would be from the governor and his administration and have those discussions out in public, I think that it gives the people a certain amount of hope that we need at this time. So doing so more quickly than not seems to be a pretty reasonable idea to me.
BJ,
you want to add anything to that, Representative Bell?
Yeah, let's just touch on that for a minute. 30 days ago, we're sitting here with a state that's flush with cash, $3.9 billion in unemployment reserve, a SCIF fund of hundreds of millions of dollars in cash from the local projects across the state, and things were great here in North Carolina. One of the fastest growing states, booming economy. No one can prepare for a pandemic. The last time this happened was 1918. We're in uncharted territory, and this has really taken us by surprise. So what we're going to have to do at the General Assembly side is, as you've seen the task forces that have started a meeting on healthcare, on economic development, and education. We're going to have to look and see what we can do from a government standpoint to assist our local governments, to assist our school system, to make sure that we do have a successful plan put in place. And it's going to be tough. It's really going to be tough. We've looked at the issues we've had after the hurricanes. I go back to that because that's a situation where we see the storm coming, we can prepare, we know what to do during the middle of the storm, and then immediately after the storm, we know how to respond. We're in a situation now where all of a sudden we weren't able, we didn't know what this was going to do. We didn't know how long this is going to be. A lot of people call it the invisible storm. or invisible blizzard. We don't know how long it's going to stay. We don't know what we're going to be dealing with. We don't know when the spike's coming, when things are going to leave. So it's very unprecedented on what we're facing. But I am proud that we're going to put a plan together. We're going to need input, not just from business community across the state, but also our education community, our small business community. And we're really going to need to pull together to get through this. And there's no doubt in my mind that North Carolina will be resilient at the end of the day.
And a couple questions, simple questions we got earlier today, and I've seen a couple in the comments as well, and that is related to the executive order and the enforcement side of it. So, for example, if someone needs to move this weekend, what are the risks to them to being on the road or out and about? Same for someone that the question was, do I need a permission slip for my job? These are a lot of very simple questions, but really important because people want to adhere to the law, but they don't want to get in trouble at the same time. Senator Perry?
Sure. Housing is part of basic safety and security. So if you have to relocate, that is not a problem for you to do that. And no, the governor's office has advised that no paperwork is required from anyone at this time by the state. Now, and we don't have a local ordinance or any type of order requiring that in Wayne or Lenoir County, or Representative Bell also has parts of Greene and Johnston, and they don't have an order of that nature either.
All right. There was another question about businesses. Has the idea of suspension of payroll taxes or workers' comp or other labor-related taxes been considered as far as the government making some extra sacrifices for these business owners?
The governor has some flexibility in the emergency declaration to do some things on the unemployment side. The major policy issues dealing with the sales tax, unemployment issues will have to come from the General Assembly, and that's one of the areas that the Economic Development Task Force is working on right now to see what we can and cannot do and what's feasible. Because some things sound great, but it may take a whole budget cycle to kick in, and so we have to look at how things are properly written and legislated to be able to look at the statutes to see what can benefit businesses and what doesn't benefit business. And so you saw that discussion starting to take place last week.
And when this committee has their conversation, what's the plan to bring the House and Senate back into session? What is your anticipated date now, and what steps you put in place to keep everybody protected?
That's one of the issues that myself and Speaker Moore and Representative Lewis who's our rules chair, have actually talked about in great detail with our House principal clerk. One of the issues that we run into is, the Constitution was written in a certain way, and video recording devices were never thought of at the time. So how can we constitutionally come in and we'll vote? And we're working through those parameters. We have 60 desks in the General Assembly. I have to have, in the House of Representatives, I have to have a 61 member quorum to be able to properly proceed with a vote. Do we space those out to where we have one person per desk and then have the speaker, which gets a 61? Do we expand the time to vote so we can come in blocks of 10? But also I have 120 members there in the House, and 64 of them were over the age of 60. And so we also had a member, Representative Black, who passed away last week. So now we're down to 119 members properly seated before the House. So I do have to take all those considerations into effect before we come in and vote. And so it is pretty tough logistically, but we're navigating through those circumstances. And what I think you'll see a plan A, B, and C, because we do have people that we do not need in the building due to previous health conditions, but that fall in that in a very susceptible rate. So we have to navigate through those channels. But you'll more than likely see us go in at the end of April right now as planned. You could see that backed up a couple weeks, depending on the situation at hand. But it will be a very tightly controlled environment. You're more than likely to see the building closed off to the public if we're still under this executive order, and we'll abide by the executive order as well as we come into the building to do business.
And I want to touch on one other subject, and that is the subject of public education. We've seen a tremendous amount of what I think of in terms of heroics from the education institutions we have in our state, both private and public. And I know you guys have certainly helped govern the public side. Do you see any long-term sustainability with some of the innovation that's happened with the Zoom technology and other things? I know we want the kids back in the classroom, but going into next school year, do you think there's going to be some conversations around implementation of new technology for our school systems?
Senator, you want to start with this one, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
I think you will see, over the last couple of years in the General Assembly, you've seen conversations of virtual education, virtual charters, and how that plays into it. I think some areas in North Carolina, are very lacking with the technology side. But you've also seen some counties and school systems across the state excel. They've actually practiced for events like this. They practice for delays and snows and hurricanes, et cetera, never for a virus, but they implemented those plans they put in, and they're excelling with virtual learning. We have teachers doing an incredible job of educating kids through a computer screen. We have parents that have either they're working from home or lost their jobs, so have turned in to help educate their kids from home. So it's been a total team effort on our public education part. I think you'll see a lot more digital learning platforms in our university system, as well as a community college. But one of the issues that we face in rural North Carolina is the access to internet and some of our more rural areas. And so we've made a lot of stride in that area over the last couple of years, but I think now we see the tremendous importance it has, not just on our economic development, but on our education system. You'll see plans put in place for digital learning platforms here moving forward, and I feel confident that with the effort that we've put in there, that you'll see that grow here in the state.
And Senator Perry, any final thoughts from you before we close the broadcast? Anything you want to make sure the folks at home know about or understand before we leave them today? Sure.
A few things. I've had a lot of questions about paying for COVID-19 testing. And if someone is in the gap, North Carolina, in compliance with the legislation that was just passed, has applied for an 1115 waiver so that that would be covered up to 200% of the federal poverty level for testing as well as treatment if someone is in a coverage gap. Also, the state health plan has waived co-pays and prior authorization requirements for testing. So I wanted to make sure people were aware of that, and we'll share more information as it becomes available. Also, just some things that some are not aware of regarding state government. I've been asked, hey, why don't you file a bill? Why haven't you filed any legislation? And that's because you can't file legislation unless you're in session. So it's not allowed. It's against state law and against rules. So that's not something that takes place. And it takes a supermajority for the legislature to call itself into session. And we, clearly, as folks who paid attention to the budget, we don't have a supermajority, and we also have health concerns for the members because of them being in high-risk categories. We also need more information. We need to know what we need to address and what needs to be provided, and we are working through working groups and subgroups to try to do that in a less than perfect environment. But I want people to understand that right now, the legislature, the General Assembly, when we're into an executive order of this nature and in a declared state of emergency, the governor and the Secretary of Health and Human Services make the calls. There are certain things required by statute that must continue that we have had conversations about and potentially trying to have some law changes that would be retroactive in the same year. But a lot of steps are being taken place. And when we talk about a plan for the future and what's going to be done, what we're talking about is the immediate and what's going to be the step down plan as we determine, at what point will testing indicate that people can go back to work? At what point should we start phasing out some of these orders around the state? So that's the kind of planning that we're talking about. And unfortunately, without information, all we have today would be a great deal of emotion, because our people are hurting and we want something to provide them with some relief.
I appreciate that. And Representative Bell, any final comments? I know we've got a couple more questions, but we need to try to wrap things up. Any final comments from you, sir? Thank you for coming on too.
Thank you, BJ. And first of all, I want to thank Neuse, and scrolling at the bottom of the screen is the COVID hotline where you can text 211 to get information. I know people have done that and continue getting updates, and so I appreciate Neuse continuously reaching out and putting the information out there. Myself and Senator Perry are doing that as well on our social media platforms and trying to answer as many questions and phone calls as possible. We're constantly in communication with our local school systems and local county commission boards to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all working together. This is unprecedented times, and I know people are scared. I know people are worried. I know we have a lot of businesses that are in a panic, and you just know that we're all going to do our best to do what we can do to make North Carolina a shining example of what to do in a crisis situation like this. I'd like to digress for a minute. And over the weekend on Friday, we had a very tragic loss, not just in Wayne County, but for all of Eastern North Carolina, with the loss of Trooper Nolan Sanders. And he was a fine young man, left behind a young wife and a 7-month-old daughter. And so I asked the people listening and across North Carolina and the world to pray for his wife and family at this time. Thank you.
Well, look, thank you very much. Thank you, Representative Bell, Majority Leader, and thank you, Senator Perry, for both of your work. I know I've seen some of your social media activity. Really appreciate using this incredible tool to continue to get factual information out for the public. Thank you, gentlemen, both for jumping on this video chat here today.
Thank you, sir.
All right, and I just want to say again, thank you to everybody who's watching. If you haven't done it already, please share this broadcast, whether it's to a group or to your Facebook page or in a private message to somebody, because there's a lot of important information as it relates to the executive order that goes into effect at 5 o'clock this afternoon, or unemployment benefits, or you're a small business owner, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure we're sharing this positive or at least accurate information with you as much as we possibly can. I also want to say a special thanks to Lenoir Community College for a public service announcement. The college, if you've seen in the red ticker below, you'll see if you have any questions for Lenoir Community College as relates to COVID-19, just go to lenoircc.edu. And I do want to let you know that some people help donate, chip in to help Neuse. We have started getting the shirts in. And so I've got the first batch now. We're going to film a short fun video talking about how you can pick it up, thinking about social distancing. But if you want to chip in and get one of these cool #NeuseCruise t-shirt, just go to neusenews.com/t-shirt and you can chip in. We've had as little as $6 and as much as $100, whatever. We're not asking for a specific amount, but we'll definitely give you a t-shirt, and we'll handle the sales tax on our end on that. So thank you all so much for that. I want to make sure that you join our breaking news text alerts. Just text the keyword NN to 484848. That's NN to 484848. And as always, subscribe to Neuse at neusenews.com/subscribe. Thank y'all so much for watching, and please stay safe and wash your hands.